Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Art of Cybersecurity series with me, Chirag Joshi. Now, the topic for today is the art of mindfulness in cybersecurity. Now, as you might have heard me talking about this in some of our previous episodes, and if you follow me on social media, I'm a massive advocate on the importance of mindfulness and combination of our mental, physical well-being together in our professional journeys, because really if you're missing one part of your life, the other part of your life naturally struggles. So this is an area I'm very passionate about. And the guest I have to join me today on the show is somebody who I know shares that passion. And she has dedicated a big part of her professional life to mindfulness. So I'm very excited to bring on Nathalie Heynderickx to the show. Now, Nathalie, welcome. I know you've been doing a lot of great things when it comes to mindfulness. Now, Nathalie actually has a very interesting background in history for our audience. She started out in technology roles in business intelligence, amongst others. She worked with consulting companies in industry, and then she transitioned her career into executive coaching, into mindfulness, into leadership, into teaching. So a lot of great thought leadership that is derived from years of real experience in the field as well. So I think it's a perfect combination of someone who I want to have this conversation with, who is not just approaching it from an academic background, which she has, in a really solid capacity, but also somebody who has had the practical experience of doing it in a corporate environment. So Nathalie, welcome again. So good to have you.
Thanks so much, Chirag. Pleasure to be here. So look forward to have a chat.
Awesome. Now, look, and for the audience, actually, it's interesting. Nathalie and I met for the first time when I was doing a talk with Branko, and actually Branko was one of our guests on a previous podcast. We were talking about the art of
hacking the brain,
mindfulness. So we were trying to bring that aspect in, and Nathalie was attending our session, and I think just talking to her afterwards and getting so many insights from her as well on her feedback was so enlightening. And then I had the good fortune of being in a forum that Nathalie runs, and just the way they started with a grounding exercise of meditation, that just resonated with me so much. So that's why I'm very excited, because it's somewhere where the minds have aligned, our visions are very much aligned. So anyway, Nathalie, I've gone on and given the audience a very small snippet of experience. Do you want to give the audience a little bit more about your background and how you ended up where you ended up?
Sure. Let's do it. So, where should I start? Try to be as succinct as I can. So as Chirag mentioned, my background is actually in computer science. So that's my academic background. So I'm originally from Brazil. If anyone is wondering where my accent comes from, was made in Rio in Brazil, and worked in the tech space back in Brazil for a number of years with companies like IBM, Ernst & Young, started programming, back in the days with C++ and Pascal and Delphi. For those that can tell a little bit about my age. And then I moved into SAP, so worked with SAP as an ABAP, so programming in ABAP. And then eventually I moved to sales and distribution, business warehousing, and business intelligence. So fast forward to 2006, migrated from Brazil to Australia, joined here Accenture, so was with Accenture for a number of years, still working in BI, in business intelligence space. And had a fantastic experience. I think I'm very grateful for my days back in tech. However, the more I started to lead people and the senior I became as a leader, the more interested I became into human behavior and people leadership, and less passionate about systems and processes. So that's how I started to gradually transition from my tech career, and I started this brand new career at the mid-age. So in 2015, I took the leap of faith and I went on a sabbatical. I had, back then I had too many miles and points for traveling a lot in consulting. So I took a around the world trip, ticked off many items from my bucket list. And then that's when I started my career as a coach / facilitator / later on lecture at Monash. Yeah. So I hope that makes sense.
Oh, it does, and it's like an awesome journey, right? And then just having taken that leap into doing something that you're passionate about, always a courageous and a great thing to do. All right, so Nathalie, so want to jump into some of the key discussion points, and I think the first one we have to start there is Mindful Manifesto. So I personally love it, but would you want to talk to the audience about what is Mindful Manifesto, how it came about, and how is it useful?
Of course, of course. And, we spoke briefly, and when you gave me a heads up about that, I thought, like, let me check what is the definition of a manifesto. And I look it up. I have a cheat sheet here. So manifesto, if you go to the dictionary, is a public declaration of policies and aims. So the Mindful CIO Manifesto, Chirag, really started as my intention to put on paper my vision for tech leaders applying mindful leadership practices. The background was actually an article that I published on LinkedIn in 2018. Something that I didn't mention with my intro is that when I decided to, start to transition from tech into leadership development, coaching, training, facilitation, in that year, it was 2014, I started working with a company called Potential Project. So I was still working with Agile Energy, which was my last tech job as a business intelligence governance manager. And on the side, one day a week, I went 4 days a week at AGL, and 1 day a week, I was teaching corporate mindfulness to really large clients like Air Services, British Petroleum, Bendigo Bank, HP, and other companies. So I started to see the benefits that corporate mindfulness had in those teams for those leaders. And I couldn't help to think of what mindful leadership practices could do in the tech space, because I was still in the tech space. So it took me a couple of years actually to write the manifesto. And I wrote, and it is aspirational, many leaders that I read say, Nathalie, come on. And I say, hey, it's aspirational, it's a guide, it's a framework for discussion, really. But the intention is really and that's what we do in the Mindful CIO community, right? We bring those declarations to discuss, to reflect, to see how can we make that a reality in our teams and organizations. And you ask, why is that important? I think it is important because there's a book from Tony Schwartz called "The Way We Are Working Is Not Working," and I believe that the pace and the working styles that we have, they are not working for many of us. So to achieve high performance in a sustainable manner, we need to do some adjustments. And the Mindful CIO Manifesto propose some of those things that we can do to perform well in a sustainable manner.
That's awesome, Nathalie. So just give a little bit more about, like, in the manifesto, what are some of the, the 2 or 3 key points that you want to highlight that you feel can make a lot of tangible difference? I know you said it's aspirational, but even with that, like, I think the 2 or 3 key points that you think can really benefit people and can guide our thinking, what would those be?
Yes, of course. If you look at, we have 2 versions of the manifesto, because the first one was published and I received some feedback after I did an event for CIONet, which is a global community of CIOs. And then myself and Michael Lambert, sorry, I'm giving you the long answer, Chirag. Myself, Michael Lambert, and back then Jeff Murray, who was the CIO for Swinburne University, we got together, we said, okay, let's make the manifesto more concise, more memorable, because I had 10 declarations in the first manifesto, the 1.0. But answering your question, Chirag, it's all around self-awareness, cultivating self-awareness, cultivating focus, which is, of course, core of mindfulness, self-care, and people leadership skills, or human skills, if you like. So it's all the declarations, they go around those 4 pillars or the 4 themes, if you like. So self-awareness, understanding yourself so you can actually understand others, self-care, taking good care of yourself, putting your oxygen mask first so you can take care of your team. People leadership skills or human skills, and focus on whatever you're doing.
Look, I think they resonate really well to me, and I feel, let's just think about cybersecurity, right? And I look at that field, and it's something obviously that that I am very passionate about in all different ways. The self-awareness bit. And I think the bit also around empathy, which is ingrained in some of the teachings that you have, that is so important because when I mention mindfulness, I mention, the differentiating skills, soft skills, these are not nice to have. This is not you just, sitting in a room and meditating. That could be part of it, but that's not the whole thing. The idea is you can actually practically do so much with it. So a big problem in cybersecurity is the disconnect that exists between technology professionals and cybersecurity practitioners and the people who they are there to help and serve, the customers, the business, the stakeholders. They don't speak in the same language. Sometimes there is a lack of pragmatism. There's a lack of understanding where that other person is coming from. There's a lack of communicating things effectively such that the business or the executive on the other side can understand what you're proposing, why you're proposing, the benefits, as opposed to the technical jargon. All of this is rooted in the things that you're mentioning. So it's not just about, it's not just something that is a nice to have. To me, it's an essential part of being an effective professional. So, which is where I think the Mindful Manifesto is so powerful because it gives that direction, and then you can start thinking about all the stuff that you can do to be a more effective professionally known field. So with that, Nathalie, just moving to, because I think this touches upon that topic. So like I said, I gave you my kind of version of mindfulness. What does mindfulness mean to you? And if you had to think of an example in your professional life, in your coaching, in your teaching, where would you see that by applying that mindfulness idea, you saw that aha moment go off in someone's mind and they got it. And at that moment, they were on board. Is there a story you can share?
Yes, there'll be a few. So mindfulness, yeah. And you mentioned, I think it's probably good to define, what mindfulness is, what mindfulness is not. We spoke about that earlier. And your point around for cybersecurity professionals to be able to listen, to speak the same language. And in order to have effective communication, you need to be really present, be able to listen.
Yes.
And in order to be able to listen, you need to really create space in your mind, right? There is a TED talk from a guy called William Ury about listening. It's a beautiful, sorry, sidetracking, as I told you, we probably would. It's a beautiful TED talk. So William Ury, he's a mediator. So he works with boardrooms, with politicians, resolving civil wars and helping people to come to agreements. And he talks about the need to have space in your mind when you want to listen, because if you don't listen to yourself, how you can listen to others? So creating space and mindfulness is a big element of that. But moving on from being a good communicator and a good listener, mindfulness. So there's a misconception around mindfulness that mindfulness is about switching off or having no thoughts. That's almost a bit of a naive, because unfortunately, understanding of mindfulness. So there are many definitions. I'm happy to share some classical definitions of mindfulness, but one that I like, that I think is very practical for me, it's simply mindfulness is the ability to be present with the object of choice. And the object of choice could be people or tasks. So I think putting the context of the workplace, that's what it is. Mindfulness is the ability to be present with the object of choice. So object of choice could be, a document that you're creating, could be a person that you're speaking in a meeting, or could be your breath. Whatever is the object of choice. So it's ability to be able to focus. So there are some definitions from renowned authors in that space. I have a couple of cheat sheets here to call them precisely. So John Kabat-Zinn, who is a very renowned scholar in this space, he says that mindfulness means paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So attention is a key component there. And another definition from Alan Wallace, who is also a PhD, in neuroscience, and also a student from the Dalai Lama, he says mindfulness is the faculty of sustaining voluntary attention continuously upon a familiar object without forgetfulness or distraction. So you see, both definitions has the attention as a key element there. Now, and I'll go back to your point of no aha moment and story around mindfulness. But other ways to define mindfulness is also a mental state, of being mindful. You can say that is the mental state where you are aware with what's happening in your surroundings, within you, your thoughts, your emotions. That's also one way to define mindfulness. Some people could say, I like the idea that mindfulness is a superpower, in the VUCA world with, everything that we have to deal with in the digital age. Mindfulness is a superpower and can also be a strategy to enhance focus and therefore enhance performance. So many different angles of, defining mindfulness. Now, to the second part of your question, Chirag, where have I seen mindfulness being, aha moment? Or I think one that comes to mind, one client that I had, executive coaching client, it was actually someone that I worked in the past, and then we end up deciding to work together. He saw me active on LinkedIn and reached out, and back then he was working with IBM. So we did a few sessions of executive coaching, and after a few sessions he said, Nat, you know what, I don't need accountability. Because a big element of executive coaching is having the space for reflection, having someone challenging you, but also accountability. And he said, what I need, it's focus, calm, and clarity. So let's switch from, because I have the two key programs that I work with clients is executive coaching and mindfulness mentoring. So he said, let's shift to mindfulness mentoring, and that's what we did. And and it was a big milestone for him to be able to develop that focus, calm, and clarity with a mindfulness practice. I don't know if that kind of answer your question.
No, it does. I mean, look, it's actually it's really powerful in that sense, right? Is in this world, especially, and this is my opinion, I think one of the biggest challenges we have is the lack of focus, the lack of ability to stay present. And this is a problem that impacts a lot of people. I think in the world where we're so used to reels or shorts or whatever they might be, these 20, 30-second things, the ability to be present, because real conversations, real meaningful interactions take a bit of time. And they need all of you all at the same time to be there. Because if you are not, active listening has been around for a long time. And I think the lack of focus is a big problem that hinders a lot of careers, and I think hinders a lot of progress, because I think you're not able to build those relationships or build those channels or be effective in your presentations. Because if all I'm thinking about is what I'm going to say next and not listening to what you're saying, that's not a conversation at that point. That's just, two people talking at each other. So I think it's such a powerful thing, what you mentioned. And, the other thing which while you were speaking, and now I reflect on that, I think I personally, like a lot of things that David Goggins, I'm not sure if you'd heard of David Goggins, but he's written a couple of books, very prominent in terms of, his, he wouldn't call it motivational speaking, but I think he calls it accountability and discipline. And he's a ex-Marine and has really interesting history. But one of the things that he talks about is motivation is not enough. And I completely agree, because some days you wake up, you're not motivated. Some days you just are not motivated, and motivation won't last. What will last is discipline. What will last is ability to actually do things despite not having motivation. But even discipline needs the clarity of mind. So when you said that you need to, have that calm, because there's so much going on, right, in our lives, personally, professionally, even professionally, 50 things going on, especially if you are an ambitious person who wants to move ahead, the kinds of people who would come to you, Nathalie, to be guided, to be coached. These people have plenty going on. Their minds are active all the time. But when they can take the time to step back and just compartmentalize and put them into different areas, I think that's where the real power comes in. The superpower, to your point, comes with that focus. I think focus is our new superpower in this age of distractions that we live in. So I think I really like the example that you gave there. Cool. So I think in terms of that, and I think that's we want to something now in terms of the community that you built and the people you brought in together. Based on the interactions that you had with all these great, successful, professional, high achievers, for our audience, what are what are the one or two things you want to share that they can personally take and improve in their own careers? Because we have a wide range of people who tune into our show. They could be technical professionals, they could be leaders, they could be people interested in getting in the field, they could be mid-level managers looking at the next stage in their careers. So what are the one or two things that you can share based on all this wisdom you have that can help them think about the next step?
Thanks, Chirag. I will struggle to share one or two, I'm afraid.
Share more. Share as many as you can.
And I was going through, as I said, I was like, wow, that's such a great question. So recently, I spoke with Rob James, who was former CTO of Qantas and CIO of Vodafone. And a while ago, spoke with Angela Kolb from Johnson & Johnson, who is now with Accenture. So there are some really, really good gold nuggets there. But before, if I may, can I jump back to what you just mentioned before, the importance of focus in this digital age? There is a whole research piece around, I don't know if you heard this idea of the attention economy. That's what we experience because our attention, our focus has so much value, right? So for those who want to research more about the importance of focus that you touched on, just look into this attention economy. Highlights learnings from our past guest speakers from the Mindful Sales community. There are many, and actually I'll refer to my cheat sheet if that's okay. So with Rob, for example, one thing that he highlighted, he was managing the team at a time of a merge when TPG was acquired by Vodafone. So he said one thing that was very important for him was to get the right people in the right roles, and not being afraid to make mistakes, to experiment, and then if not working, shift and change, but getting the right people in the right roles, and also get to know your people so you really understand their strengths, their areas for development, so you can actually make the most of their strengths. Another point that Rob raised was the importance of culture, of course, and which is very aligned with the Mindful Sales Manifesto. And just keep in mind that culture is pretty much a collective of behaviors and mindsets. He also spoke about being able to switch off in his own language, which I don't love that kind of terminology, switch off, but that's how many people, I guess, would define the ability to reset, recharge, and defrag their brain. And for Rob was really around, being active. He used to play the piano. He used to be a musician. So music, listening or playing, having a fitness routine, or even mindfulness. So the self-care element, I think was present for everyone that we spoke. Another thing that he mentioned that it might be good to, that he recommended me personally as a leader to experiment with, is to not only get to know your people and leverage their strengths and areas for development. Leverage their strengths and be aware of the areas for development, but also challenge them and perhaps set up situations where people with different working styles can actually have to work together as a bit of a stretch goal. And probably the final point from Rob was the importance of psychological safety. I don't know if you're familiar with the project Aristotle from Google, and the idea of psychological safety, which is really key. And for leaders, we know that we only can develop it through others. So creating psychological safety, developing positive relationships with your people is really, it's crucial for delivering results. So those were some of the insights from Rob, but I'll pause there. And maybe the last one, I think I mentioned to you before, the mantra that I asked if had any mantra or leadership lesson, he shared his mantra, which is passion will prevail. So his thinking is that if you do something that you are truly passionate, you find the energy, you find the time, you find a way, because that passion will give you energy.
Well said. No, I think 100%. I think that energy is such a key part of our life. And this is where something that I know you are very passionate about is, you mentioned leadership, but also the psychology aspect of things. And maybe we and you've been very generous with your time, Nathalie, but I think maybe this is where we would probably conclude, but keen to get your thoughts on this is, as we think about the psychology and how we are wired as people, one of the big challenges that we face, not just in cybersecurity, but tech and broadly is, with the world that is changed so quickly on us, burnout's a real thing. Stress, unhealthy stress is a real thing. It's, not all stress is equal. The unhealthy stress is a real thing. And I feel sometimes you need to kind of take a step back and think about your brain. You got to think about, learn a little bit about these things. And for me, some of the insights that have come to me, I'm not a psychologist by any means, but, by reading, through my interest, through my own personal experience of leading teams, I think what I see is, if you understand how your brain is wired, it's not wired to make you happy. It's wired to make you survive. That's what the original purpose was. So if you understand that, you can get a sense of, the fear, the negative self-talk, the things that we put on ourselves, imposter syndromes, trying to be perfect all the time, because there's this chatter in your head going, you're not good enough, you're not good enough. If you understand that's just chatter, and you don't have to pay attention because you got to control that brain, I think that liberates you so much. Because to me, I think that's been something that has been very powerful in my life, and that has helped me, move past barriers. Other thing, which is not directly psychology, but has really helped psychology, and I've shared this with my LinkedIn network and others, is that I practice martial arts, and to me, martial arts has been an absolute awesome thing for my overall well-being, not just physical. Because in that 1 hour or whatever time I'm there, I'm not thinking anything else. I'm thinking of the next punch, the next kick, the next move. Your mind is there. So it's not, technically, I'm not switched off. My mind is as active as ever. It's just that it's focused on that thing. So, I mean, these were the two aspects of the physical, mental that I thought I would share. But because you are such an advocate of positive psychology for behaviors, what are your thoughts? What are some of the things that you think on this front?
Yes, not sure how to answer your question, but I'm distracted with something that you mentioned before, and I would like to comment.
It's an open discussion area. It's not really a question. I'm just keen to get your thoughts on psychology and what do you think?
I have heaps to share in that space. But on your point before about the brain and how the brain kind of designed to keep us alive, right? To, running away from the tiger, chasing us and all that kind of thing. So it's good to keep in mind that we have, of course, even being simplistic, because I'm not a neuroscience myself either. But the parts, so if you look at the brain, as there are three parts. So we have the amygdala, or the reptilian brain, which is the oldest part of the brain, which we share with the reptiles. That's really the survival mode focus part of the brain. Then we have the emotional brain, which is another part, which is a little bit more recent. And finally, we have the new frontal cortex, or the prefrontal cortex, which is the intellectual, we call the executive part of the brain, which is the most recent part of the brain. So the part of the brain that has the negative talk, the fight and flight and freeze, is really a very old part of the brain. The beauty, of course, and I'm biased, as you know, Chirag, and I'll blow my own trumpet here around mindfulness. The beauty of mindfulness, that mindfulness can also enhance the prefrontal cortex, that executive part of the brain, which help us to be more rational, more logical, not just more rational, more logical, but also more empathetic, and manage better that reptilian brain that, continuously trying to, keep us safe, but can be negative sometimes. So just another consideration around mindfulness, and another benefit of practicing mindfulness to balance out that internal negative self-talk that we all experience now, if we are aware enough of our thoughts. So that's one thing that I wanted to comment. And now back to positive psychology. What can I say? There are so many things there. I think one thing to leave your audience with, that is a pretty simple model and something that people could look into, or we could share in the show notes later. It's called the PERMA model. The PERMA model is a framework created by Peter Salomon, who is the godfather of positive psychology. And PERMA stands for P is positive emotion. So think empathy, gratitude, kindness. E stands for engagement. It's about being engaged with whatever you're doing, be engaged. R stands for relationships, so cultivating positive relationships. M stands for meaning, so looking for meaning in whatever you are doing. And A, it's for accomplishment. So according to Peter Selman and according to the research in positive psychology, once we experience to a certain level those 5 elements, positive emotions, engagement, positive relationships, meaning, and accomplishment, we enjoy well-being. So that's the science of well-being. So if we're talking about, good habits or good routines or rituals, looking for routines or rituals around those 5 elements, it's something that could be really beneficial, according to positive psychology.
Great stuff there. So much insights and wisdom. And Nathalie, maybe do you want to just share with the audience a little bit about where they can find, more about the Mindful CIO community, the Mindful Manifesto? We will share those links in the show notes as well. But anything that you want to share with the audience now?
Yeah, thanks, Chirag. Well, it's pretty easy. I mean, if you haven't seen me on LinkedIn yet, mindfulcio.community is the URL of our website. So if you have a look, you find out a little bit more about the purpose, the vision, the values, and also you can watch past recordings of previous speakers. Rob James that I mentioned here, Angela Kolb, many others are available there. It's at this stage it's open to to the public in our YouTube channel as well. So have a look, and we'd love to see some of your followers, Chirag, in future roundtables that we run in a monthly basis. And Chirag, by the way, for those who haven't seen, Chirag has been one of our guest speakers recently. So check it out, Chirag's interview at the Mindful CIO community YouTube channel.
Yeah, I definitely encourage people to do that. And I had the privilege of being there. It was really good community, and just it serves a bigger purpose, and that's what I really liked about it. It's really awesome. So, and the ability now that we have to go back and look at those episodes at our own pace is such a powerful thing. So Nathalie, massive thanks to you for your time.
Very welcome.
All these amazing insights. I know the audience would have benefited tremendously. I know I have. These conversations always remind me of the things that are important and things I need to do to fine-tune my own well-being in my own career. So thank you very much again, and a massive thank you to our audience as well for joining us. See you next time.